Welcome to the Deep Cover Podcast. Thank you for joining me for another week. I'm your host, Omar Zaran, and I kind of wanted to talk this week a little big picture about the NBA and really what the league is starting to become, what it's starting to look like. And when you really look at this past season or this current season that we're in, we have the integration of the in-season tournament. We have an influx of international players. And when you really kind of think about it, it started to remind me a lot of European soccer, specifically the English Premier League. So, if you're familiar with the Premier League, you know it is widely regarded as the best league in Europe, right? It's where most of your high level talent want to go. Now, you might quibble and say that's the Spanish league, La Liga, but at worst, it's the second best league in the world, right? So, but a lot of players, regardless of their nationalities, will go and play for Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, whoever the case may be, right? And it doesn't matter the nationality. You don't have to be English to play in the Premier League. So it's kind of really a melting pot league where a lot can happen and a lot of high level play happens. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the NBA. We're seeing a 25% population of internationally born players from over 100 countries in the league today, right? So what that means is the best of the best in France, Spain, Africa, Germany, the Eastern European countries, all of those guys are coming and playing here in the NBA. And what you're seeing is the best players in the league are foreign born right now, right? Joel Embiid from Cameroon. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo from Greece, Nikola Jokic from Serbia, Luka Doncic from Slovenia, and now we have Victor Wembanyama, who's going to be the next guy up, also from France. Rudy Gobert from France, an elite defensive player. So there is a lot of talent coming from Europe and making its way to the NBA. And it seems like the NBA is recognizing this and saying, well, we are going to really dial in on being an internationally friendly league. And I kind of start to wonder, do we start seeing more of an integration into other policies and other sort of machinations that we might see from European soccer in the NBA? So it started with the in-season tournament, which mirrors a lot of the domestic cups you see in England, France, Spain, and other countries where all the countries that are in there play for a domestic cup in addition to the league, right? In European soccer, you see teams playing for throughout the regular season to win their domestic trophy. Who is to say that in the NBA we might not see that at some point in addition to the playoffs? European soccer has relegation. That is a thought that some fans have thrown out as something that they might be interested in over the course of time. So the NBA is increasingly becoming an international game. It's a sport now that has grander ambitions than winning just in the United States, right? I think that at this point in the game, they've kind of ceded the US to the NFL and have placed their aspirations more globally. It's why they play games in Paris. It's why they play games in China. It's why they have youth academies and growth schools in Africa and throughout Europe. The NBA really wants to have the game be looked at as an international game, so they're bringing the international talent in. And I think it's ultimately a good decision because what you're seeing here is these international players, they have a totally different system than the development of AAU here in the United States, and they are able to kind of hit the ground running. We saw Luka Doncic right away was good. Victor Wembanyama right away is dominating games, even though his team isn't winning. Him individually is having an incredible impact on the games for the Spurs. And I just think that while some people may be hesitant to accept it, this is kind of what it's become. It has become while it's called the National Basketball Association, it's really the International Basketball Association, right? And we're going to continue to see more and more of these players in here. So why wouldn't we see more and more policies, more and more structures that are centered around the success of European soccer? Joining me this week is John Dub and Fresh X from the Hoopers podcast and Off the Ball Network. Uh, Fresh and Dub are two great basketball minds, and this is a subject that we both all three of us connected on in terms of how the NBA is being positioned, what the NBA is becoming. And we had a long conversation about the influx of talent, the success of the in-season tournament, what could be looking at moving forward. Is a Champions League style tournament ever in play for the NBA and other basketball leagues? Are we going to see some rules adopted from FIBA and things of that nature? So it's a great conversation with two really sharp basketball minds. I think you'll enjoy it and really think about how the league can change. What can really be done to continue to make the product better? Because I would argue right now, the league is in an incredibly good place. The skill level has never been higher. And the competitive nature of the Western Conference and Eastern Conference is tremendous. You have star talent all over the place. You have relatable superstars. You have a lot of good going on in the NBA. But we will talk a little bit more about that right after the break with Dub and Fresh from the Hoopers. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Deep Cover Podcast. All right, joining me now on the Deep Cover podcast is what I like to call Atlanta's finest, right? Our guys, the Hoopers from Off the Ball Network, the Hoopers podcast. Some great basketball talk from these guys. First of all, let me let you guys properly introduce yourselves, everybody. How are we doing today?
Oh, my bad. Oh, man, we doing good. Of course, I'm John W.
It's Fresh X, and man, it's good to be here with you, Omar. You one of my favorite people on Twitter. I love the stories you write and everything, so it's definitely cool to be here with you, bro.
Nah, for sure. Nah, Sam, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we've kind of done episodes together before. We talked on the group chats and stuff like that. So a lot of familiarity. And, whenever we're talking basketball, especially higher level stuff, I always like you guys are one of the first people I thought of for this topic. And, it's something I think we've talked about, privately a lot is, the NBA is kind of becoming more and more international, right? It's becoming a game that's a lot more like European soccer, right? And when the in-season tournament came out, I know we had all talked about. It's like, man, this sounds a lot like a domestic cup, that you might see in Europe. So, without further ado, we're going to kind of chop into that real quick here. But before that, I know you guys are in Atlanta. How you guys feeling about the Hawks before we jump into everything?
I like that they got that win the other day, show a little resilience of the season, but
Yeah,
they don't have to win anymore this year. Like, I don't have to see anything else. Like,
Yeah, there's no real point of them making a play. And I'm gonna be honest, the atmosphere in Atlanta is slightly a little toxic right now around this Trae Young situation.
Definitely.
So it's gonna be a really interesting summer, honestly, because you're gonna find out if there's really some smoke there to them potentially trying to choose between Trae and DeJounte. Overall, the city is got Trae back. Like the kids love him here. He's actually been like in a few pro-ams out here. Like the city likes him. So it's just been kind of weird since he's been out.
Yeah.
DeJounte has done some things here or there, but I feel like some people are kind of flipping on him. But besides, man, shout out to the Hawks. But yeah, they don't have to win no more. No point of being eliminated by Boston in the first round.
Yeah, it's kind of tough, right? Because I don't think Brooklyn's really going to catch them, for the 10 seed there. And I guess if they lose the 10-9 matchup, then onward to the offseason. So we'll see. But yeah, it's kind of just want to jump into our show here and want to talk a little bit about first just the explosion of international talent, right? So recently I was doing some research for an article, and the NBA is now 25% international, right? From 108 different countries. You got guys from Europe, guys from Asia, guys from Africa. Canada obviously has a I don't know if I want to call that international, but technically it
Yeah.
is. You know, you get a lot of international players there. So I guess for you guys, what do you think has driven these foreign-born players to want to come to the U.S. to begin with, right? Because we've seen, it started in like the '90s with Divac and Kukoc and the guys from Eastern Europe, and it's kind of expanded now. Obviously, you got guys like Pascal Siakam from Cameroon, Joel Embiid as well, an African player, and in addition to France, has a lot of players. Spain has had some players. So, what makes you think? And they do have EuroLeague there, so it's not like there's no basketball in Europe, right? But what makes you think that they have really wanted to dive into coming to the NBA now?
I think the first answer, just to keep it simple, is competitive nature.
Mhm.
Once, like you say, there is the top Euro leagues that they can all go play in, but eventually you want to go try to play against the best, whether you're an older player, you're a younger player who thinks he can have a long lifespan in the NBA. And I think the second part is keep it short. I think it still goes back to the Olympic teams. Even the '88 team that lost to the that lost in the that lost
Yeah, they lost to Divac.
they lost to Divac, like still that competitive nature. Like we can beat them on this level, we can compete with them at the NBA level. Which Divac was an all-star. See players like Jokic, Arvidas Sabonis came over after injury, but he was definitely a serviceable player.
Right.
And still, everybody want to be like Mike. Like it's the NBA. Like who doesn't want to play in the NBA as a basketball player? Like that's what you see.
Yeah, and I agree. Because I agree with most basically everything you said, but I think that '92 push and really that olive branch of the NBA players being over there and being close to Jordan, close to Magic, close to Bird, I think that just helped push push them to come to the NBA. And then, like you said, the competitive nature. Obviously, the NBA is life changing as far as like money you can make and you can give a better life for your family. But I do think like the competitive nature and just I guess what's the word, the effort the NBA has made over the last 30 plus years to like set up camps in different places. Like you said, you got NBA academies in Africa, they're in Australia, they're in Europe, China, they've been everywhere. So the NBA, David Stern, RIP to him, definitely started thinking international real early. And I mean, it came with that loss in '88 because it's like, dang, if they could beat us, how good could they be? That grows the game, it grows the business. So I think that definitely was a good push to make it happen.
It reminds me a lot of the Premier League in soccer, right? Because for a while, Premier League was just all English talent all the time. Now you look around, a Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, whoever, they're bringing in players from everywhere, from Asia, from the Americas, all over the place, not just confined to England and not just confined to Europe. And I kind of wonder if that's like the right parallel. A lot of people like to compare the NBA to the NFL, right? And
it's no comparison. But I do like that. I do like that because you do see that influx of talent coming from a variety and diverse backgrounds, and that's how you expand the game as well. And it's how you get more TV money. Business side of it.
Yeah, I guess like outside of the competitive aspect and the fact that there was talent there, do you think that the NBA back when Stern kind of cooked all this up and now it's really exploded after his passing? Like what was the other? Is there any other logic there behind wanting to have it more? Because it's the National Basketball Association, but now it's kind of become more of the International Basketball Association.
Right, it's true.
I think something that plays a part is because like they do compare to football with American football, but I would say it's different because that's such a American thing. I think the fact that basketball is so easy to play by yourself or with others, you literally can just go to the park. I mean, here in America, you go to the park without a ball, and there's some guys there. You go. I literally just saw this happen today.
That's why I was super invited.
Yeah, so and I think that's a part of it. It's easy to get multiple people involved, just like with soccer. We call it soccer, international football, but you can go out and just kick the ball around, and somebody comes in and you join in, and it can become a team thing or it's an individual thing. And I also just think it looks cool, honestly. the dunks, the passes, it's not as brutal as football, like the tackling. It looks fun. I think that really plays a part in it, honestly.
Yeah, there's like an artistry to it, right? Where like just like in soccer, we got guys who could really handle and dribble the ball well. You got that in basketball, and there's something appealing about it, right? Like
Right.
a guy who like if you just show a person who never watched basketball a highlight clip of Kyrie Irving, they're probably going to be like, man, that's something, you know, and,
Yeah, right.
you know, and
Like
they're like, yeah, people could do that. Yeah, that's crazy, you know.
Yep.
Before we kind of move on to the in-season tournament piece of this, I wanted to ask you guys, like, as you were coming up watching the game, who's like an international player that really kind of piqued your interest? Or like, you know, this guy with a weird name from Europe or something. You know, who is that guy that kind of, you know, put you on to the fact that, you know, the game isn't just an American game?
That's a good question. I've never honestly thought about that.
Honestly, I would say, and he passed real young. It really, for me, I didn't get to see him live, but just hearing a little bit more
Yeah,
later in the night. Because
Petrovic.
I'm born in '90, it was Petrovic
Nah, yeah,
because
that's
Yeah.
different.
him being a guard and how he shot the ball, and later seeing like how competitive he was. Watching him was like, oh, they could play overseas, and I would say it was him and Kukoc because
That's what I was gonna say. Kuko was the first player I realized, like, oh,
like they
he's from
really
Croatia.
hoop
He's
over
from
there.
he's from
Yeah.
Croatia. He's from somewhere else. Like
Because
you don't really think. I don't really think like and Tony Kukoc is such a regular name, but then like he's from Croatia. Like,
right.
oh,
But
really?
I think though for us, because we brothers, so we grew up together. My dad was a big basketball fan first and Jordan fan, but I remember having the '92 Dream Team
Yeah,
VHS,
yeah.
and they just talk about the run, the things that they did over there, and one of the highlights in that was Kukoc because he was an up and coming player. I think the Bulls already had his rights at the time, so just looking at him, and I'm like, oh, they scouting players in that area too, and everybody kind of remembers the first game where they just destroyed him because Jordan and was locked in on them and they kind of caught him off surprise. But even though they got destroyed in the championship game, if you go back and watch, Kukoc was hooping, and so it's like, oh, he's not just a name; he could really play over there too. So I think for me personally, it would be between him and Petrovic because you hear about Petrovic and what he could have been, just because obviously he passed and real short career. But I mean, if you go back and watch his highlights, I mean, the way he shot the ball, like I said, his competitiveness, his aggressiveness, it's a lot of Luka in that for the younger people to me.
Sure. And just
I mean, yeah,
real quick, another angle on that Yao Ming is what made me realize you can
a
take
big
it
one. Yeah.
to another level, being the number one pick like that.
Right.
So
He's the first
he was
international
first international one pick because of course you saw Powell the year before. I think when he went top six,
yeah, he
went top 10.
No, he went three.
He went three. So I was like,
okay,
okay, cool. But then you see Yao go number one. It's almost like LeBron going number one out of high school. Like that takes it to another level where you really have to start paying attention to these players and the talent that they have.
Right. Because like they really are on the radar because it wasn't just the fact that he was, I mean, 7'4", 7'6", whatever he was.
That helps. But shoot, he could actually dribble. Like
right.
He had a full skill set even at 7'6".
Agreed.
Just didn't have feet.
Right, yeah, that's the issue when you're that tall, right? You know, you always got the foot injuries and knee injuries, always a risk. And for me, guys, it was obviously Kukoc is the first one, but later after that, I feel like it was Peja Stojakovic for me, and a little bit of Tony Parker as well as that Spurs run was kind of starting, and he was kind of that first guy who was like, oh, French people could play too, and because it was always like Yugoslavia, Croatia, Russia, whatever, Eastern Bloc, that whole thing. But it was like, oh, the guys in the Western Europe, they could do it too. Obviously, you had Dirk coming from Germany a little bit after that as well, and so you had a lot of talent there. But I want to talk about the in-season tournament, which was something that the NBA just rolled out this year, and I thought it was funny seeing the American response to this tournament. Right, people were like, "What the hell is this? Useless games in the middle of the season." And the reason the league did it was because for so long, like us who subscribe to League Pass and watch games all the time, we were watching the whole season, right? But the casual fan really didn't tune in until Christmas, right? That was kind of like the unofficial kickoff of the NBA. And, the IST kind of gave them a reason in. But even beyond that, it kind of reminded me a lot of, like the Coupe de France in France, the FA Cup in England, those type of domestic cup tournaments between a bunch of different teams. And I guess it's like, do you guys see the IST kind of really being legitimized moving forward? Obviously, when the Lakers won it, they had a little mini banner at crypto, and I think people made fun of it because it's the Lakers, because it's LeBron. I wonder if, like, if the Hornets won it or something like that, if people would have cared as much. But I guess, what was your guys' thoughts on the in-season tournament, and kind of like, did they borrow? How much of it do you think that they borrowed from soccer in Europe, and kind of applied it to the NBA?
You go first.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I would say Adam Silver made it really clear that he was really like honing in on what they were doing over there and really taking interest in it, because I mean, that does bring another excitement to it. And I do think having the banner, like, it legitimizes it. It's like, this is a real thing. It's gonna keep going on. And I think it worked, honestly. Like, people tuned in for those games. The players, I feel like they took it serious. I feel like the coaches took it serious, even like to a point where, remember, it was the game and Joe Mazzulla kind of apologized. I can't remember who they played, but he kind of explained to the coach why they were still scoring,
yeah.
even though the game was away because of the scoring margin thing. So it's like, we trying to win this, so we're gonna keep scoring. I know y'all might not like it, but this is why we're doing it. So I liked it. I just think, throw a name on it. It don't just got to be the in-season tournament. Give it an official name. But I definitely think he really looked at what was going on over there in Europe, and just taking inspiration from that.
Yeah, definitely to piggyback off that, because I want to give Fresh his credit first, because the first time Adam Silver even said anything about thinking of this, maybe 5-6 years ago, he said it was going to happen. He's like, we saw the quote, it's inevitable, it's happening. So first and foremost, shout out to him for that. But he definitely took a lot from soccer just to give because they give fans something else. Like you say, it's almost like that country pride of, well, I guess in this case, that team pride of, we're the champ, we won something else that does count for something, regardless of how y'all feel about it. And it gave that time of the season a little more intensity. As you said, most casual fans don't tune in until Christmas Day, because those are usually the marquee games, marquee teams, marquee players. And regardless of how people feel about it, I'll never disrespect casuals, because casuals is what sells the game.
Exactly. Right.
So if I can get I know most people use casual as a derogatory term, as crazy as it sounds, but shout out to the casuals, because they tuned in, and that's what drives the ratings up. Because, like you say, we'll watch on NBA TV, so our couple ratings don't matter. Whereas a casual, if you feel like watching the game, he's not going to pay for NBA TV. He going to stream somewhere. I ain't gonna say no stream because I don't want to shut off for when I don't have NBA TV, but that's what they do. So it gave fans a reason, especially with 2K also offering NBA TV. It made it easier to tune in, and it made it interesting, because it gave you. We saw Phoenix and the Lakers play like 30 times this year,
right?
And the in-season tournaments because of that. We saw Orlando was battle tested for the playoffs because of the in-season tournament. So I think it was a success,
right.
But don't call it the in-season tournament. Call it something else. The Commissioner Cup, we can leave it right there. Here, Adam Silver.
I mean, that sponsorship money is coming in sometime soon, so it's going to be, somebody's going to be sponsoring that thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so in soccer though, you do have, like, obviously it's a different dynamic where you have multiple divisions, right?
Right.
In England, you got like 5 or 6 different divisions, and those type of teams can play against the big dogs and kind of get that exposure. Is there ever a possibility, in the way that basketball is growing here in the U.S., to see whether it's incorporating the Puerto Rican League, whether it's incorporating the G League, whether it's incorporating any lower level basketball league, say, hey, guess what? Random team from Mexico City, you get a chance to play against the Clippers now, and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And this is great exposure for your fan base, right? Do you guys ever see a reality where that's what the in-season tournament becomes, and maybe that becomes a little bit of more interest to the NBA teams, to want to compete more outside of obviously the extra cash bonus for winning?
Right. Omar, I think you be in our board meetings, because we've had this conversation multiple times. I fully believe in the future. Like, I don't think this thing is just going to be
about this.
Yeah, literally, we literally we talk about this all the time. I don't think this is just going to be like a Friday night thing. And even if it's just not the in-season tournament, I think going forward, there's going to be other challenges, tournaments that pop up, and to continue to draw the interest. Hey, let's get this team from the NBL. Let's get this team from this Euro League. Let's get this Greece League team, Canadian League. And it doesn't even, I don't even think it necessarily has to be in America. We can go do this location in London. We can go do it in Mexico City. I fully believe that is the future of, if not the in-season tournament, another, because in the preseason, we already kind of see it. They do like the Quebec games or the Taiwan game, and it'll be Golden State, Lakers, Boston, Memphis, and y'all play, 4 games out there, and that'll be it. I think that's gonna find its way into the regular season, and uh, like you said, give teams a chance to play other teams, other exposure to other players, and it's about the money, marketing money.
No, for sure. Oh, like you said, Omar, I was literally hoping you asked this question because not even to the point of, I think a lot of people problem with it is, oh, who else are they going to play against? It's just the NBA, and because we don't necessarily have another high level league over here as far as basketball goes, or any sport for the most part. It's either you go to the NBA or you play in some quote unquote semi-pro league,
like the
but
TBL,
the TBL, the ABA, which is still active. Any of those little leagues. But I think it would be, for lack of a better word, pretty cool if they were to include some of those teams in those leagues, maybe.
Especially the TBL, because the TBL is official. That's, if you're not in the G League, that's as close to the NBA as you're gonna get. The TBL,
and even with, I know the ABA isn't the same as what it was once, but with the ABA still being very active, and the NBA acknowledging the ABA, why not invite some of those bigger ABA teams to come? Hey, preseason, let's do your 4 best teams from each one team from each region, because that's how they do kind of do champions as well over there. They do regional type championships. So give us your 4 best team. We'll pick 4 teams. Sponsorship money, once again, marketing. This also brings more eyes on the NBA, because I don't think people realize. I see a lot of people on NBA Twitter saying how the NBA needs to recognize the ABA. I don't think people realize the ABA didn't go anywhere. So why not do a 14 thing where it's the NBA versus ABA Classic or something? You play with the ABA ball. Maybe it's the Pacers, Nuggets, Brooklyn, and the Spurs. Boom, there you go. Adam Silver, I know you listening when this come out. There goes you another tournament, because he listens to everything we say. He just don't want to let nobody know.
definitely listens.
Another thing is something I've thought about lately is, you got these big college teams now, right? And big college brands, right?
Yep.
And
everybody's always talking about how the first team could beat the worst NBA team.
Right. Which is bullshit. I mean, let's
just
be honest.
It is.
Like I always say, like the worst record in the league is the Pistons. They got like 10 lottery picks on that team. So let's, at one point we're a lottery pick or something. Let's not do that. But if you wanted to, with NIL and everything, it's kind of like your Kansas, your North Carolinas, your Dukes. They're kind of like a semi-pro team already because they're getting money. And I wonder at some point with all the conference realignment, I talked to Francis, our guy from Off the Ball, last week about this on this podcast, about how maybe eventually NBA teams license out the brands of these colleges to kind of funnel it that way, and then it becomes a big giant semi-pro league. And that's where again you could have like an invitational where, like, how wild would it be to see like Memphis playing against North Carolina, like Memphis Grizzlies against North Carolina, I should say. So it's like there's a lot of potential there. And when I think about it, like in soccer, even here in the US, you've had these kind of the US Cup, which is the UFL, your USFL or USL against the MLS teams, right? And so that's kind of like branching out the game even more. So I wonder if Adam Silver kind of is thinking of that along those lines. But one thing I do want to kind of pivot to here is the biggest tournament in European soccer is the Champions League, right? That's where you get the champions from a bunch of different leagues and they play a little tournament. And if you look at basketball, there's no shortage of leagues. Like Fresh, you mentioned a few of them, like the Greek League. You have the Pro A for France, NBL in Australia. Obviously, it's not in Europe, but still international. You have Eurobasket. All of these high level. Spain's league is really good. Turkey's league is really good. And why not have like a Champions League type thing there where the biggest names in the world kind of come in and play for bragging rights there. Do you guys think that we might see something like that where like Wembanyama is a great example, right?
Yeah.
He was playing in the French league, Metropolitans 92 last year. If they were in a Champions League, so to speak, you get a taste of Wembanyama playing against NBA talent right away before he enters the draft. So that kind of allows for more advanced scouting for NBA teams and all that. So do you guys think we would ever see a Champions League-esque style setup within our lifetimes?
Absolutely. I don't want to put a time frame on it because I would think Adam Silver really wants to see the in-season tournament do well consistently. But in the next 10 to 15 years, because as Fresh said before, they got to start funneling it to where they do play different teams from different leagues. And it's going to get to the point to where we're not going to see it happen, even though they're planting the seeds. He's going to announce it one day and it's going to be like, oh, once again, it's like, oh, what is this? When did this happen? Like, this is what he's been building up to. And I think right now, with this first in-season tournament, with how they do the Mexico games, even though I know it's not a tournament, but it is 4 teams playing games in Mexico. How the summer league, the rookies, they have a tournament basically now with 2 different invitationals. I think Adam Silver is trying to make not a bunch of tournaments, but I think he's trying to lead a path to one big championship league type tournament with Spain, with Australia, and all these different leagues. And I hope it happens. I do hope it happens in the next 10 years because I don't think anybody but us is ready for it, honestly.
Yeah, I do think we're going in that direction. Like Adam Silver has been an ambassador for the league. I think he works with like the FIBA, the FIBA board a lot. And I think when it's brought to the table, and then we've had all this talk, especially last summer, I think it was last summer about, remember no disrespect, I literally don't know his name, but the track guy was like, why are the NBA people called the world champions?
Oh, yeah.
And so I feel like that kind of stirs some stuff up where it's like, all right, let's find out who really is the world champion.
And so like, oh, that's what we doing.
Yeah, so I can see I can see it going in direction, but like you said, no time frame on it because they're gonna have to make it sense logistically, money wise, location. But when the money is brought to the table and the bragging rights is brought to the table and trying to grow the game, I definitely think that's gonna happen. Like it's when I don't know, but it's gonna happen for sure.
So the last topic here is kind of might branch out a bunch of different ways, but we'll see how it goes. But the regular season in the NBA has been kind of, a lot of people say devalued. A lot of people say, wake me up when the playoffs get here. Like right now, we're in the last 10, 15 games of the season. A lot of teams have started, if they've been eliminated, start to tank and all this other stuff. So in soccer, you have the domestic league champion, which is basically like your regular season champion. And then you also have the domestic cup as well. And then you have the continental cups with Europa Champions League. And giving a team a trophy for having the best record in the regular season, do you guys think that that's something that the NBA would do? We've seen that the hockey does do that as well with the NHL. But is that something you think the NBA would introduce? And also, do you think that teams would even care?
That's a good question. Because realistically, I would say it would be something that Adam Silver is thinking about because I don't think he necessarily wants everybody to feel gratitude or feel rewarded. But I do think, as Fresh is always trying to remind people, the one thing that the NBA and basketball is about in general is honoring greatness. And if you are a team like the Celtics is far away the best team record-wise in the NBA this year. I'm not saying if it was closer, they shouldn't be rewarded with it, but hey, you're the best team in the regular season. You do get home court advantage throughout the whole playoff, so you already been rewarded one way with it, whether you look at it or not. Why not give them a little smallish trophy for it? Not small, but a nice size trophy, just something, just more bragging rights. Like because a lot of teams still do take pride in having the best record in the NBA, having home court, because once again, as per se, it's a marathon. It's survival of the fittest. You can go 82 games and you're the best team all year. You should get something for that. You should get, some more acknowledgement for that.
Yeah, and although we all know the NBA championship is like the ultimate goal, everybody's not going to win every year. So it's like that is another way to keep people motivated, keep it competitive. It's just another incentive. And these players in the NBA, since they were kids, have been goal-driven type of players. We're trying to get to it matters to make All-Star. It matters to have number one seed, to have all these things that people think may be irrelevant. They do care about. So I think it will be a good thing to do. I think like some teams, they might brag, might rub it off like they don't care. Like, yeah, it's not a big deal, but it'll be a goal for them. I think it matters, especially if you've never done it at least once. And
there's like a young team like OKC, Minnesota.
Yeah,
like,
man, if you done did it a few times, then it's like, all right, it's not as big of a deal, but you might still appreciate it. But the first couple times, it's definitely gonna matter.
I kind of look at it too in the sense of if you're a team that does really well in the regular season, but for whatever reason just it hasn't translated to the playoffs, that's a good way to kind of honor that team historically in your arena. Like I'll use the Hawks as an example during that Joe Johnson, Al Horford era, where they were the number one seed in the East a couple times, and unfortunately, couldn't get it done in the playoffs. But there's no acknowledgement of that inside of State Farm Arena. I think that's what it's called now. So like, why? Let's say hypothetically, you call it the David Stern Trophy or whatever, right? And you could have a banner say David Stern Trophy winner, whatever. Like they do it for division championships and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking, like, why wouldn't you want to honor the fact that, hey, we were the best team, like the Warriors when they broke the record, right, for the best record. But they don't get a banner for that because they lost to Cleveland in the finals.
That's
like it's still worth saying that, hey, these guys won 73 fucking games. I mean, that's a lot. It's like
a lot of wins. It matters.
Right. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, acknowledging that more, maybe that, some fan bases, maybe they haven't won a championship, but they got that to look at, right? Where they say, hey, we also did this. This is part of our history.
Yeah.
All right, now this is where I start to get wacky and start throwing out some crazy ideas that soccer does that if we could see it work here. The first one is relegation, which is an idea that have always felt is a great thing to have in a league, where you're punished for being shitty. Like I look at a team like the Wizards, right now, which I don't know if you guys watched the Wizards at all this year, but they're real bad. And,
terrible.
They're very bad. The Pistons are bad and have been bad for about the last decade. Relegation obviously makes you go down to a secondary league, and there's less money involved there and that sort of thing. So it makes a team have incentive to want to win.
Right.
It takes away tanking. Now you could argue that the new lottery system took that away a little bit, but I still think you still are going to have teams that are going to tank regardless. So what's your guys' thoughts on relegation? Would we ever obviously have to add a bunch of teams to maybe fortify the G League or something like that to make that happen? But do you guys think that relegation is ever a possibility for the NBA?
I'm going to start by saying no. But I do think that if you can, if teams are consistently bad and they're not doing anything to get better, like you're signing we can take the Wizards for example. I like the Jordan Poole move. I'm not gonna lie. I thought Jordan Poole, if nothing else, would be a fun 20-point scorer. Maybe he would be terribly inefficient. I didn't care. I thought it was gonna be fun. He wasn't. Like Kyle Kuzma, like if you know a team isn't trying to win or build winning coaches, I do think they should be fine. I do think they should lose draft picks. I do think GMs personally should be fine because first and foremost, I'm a player first person. Like I was a player. I thought I was going to be a player. So I'm not saying I'm always on player side, but GMs are terrible. And I feel like some GMs choose to be terrible because they know the league can't do anything about it. I wouldn't put a G League team up because I think that would be even worse in a sense. But I do think that team should be punished because whatever Troy Weaver is doing up in Detroit, he isn't trying. like to tell the truth. Like,
yeah. I'm gonna say I don't think it would happen, only because I don't think all the owners would agree with it. Especially when it starts coming to, like you say, it'll be like less money and stuff like that, and that's always gonna be the driving force behind people. But I'm not against some type of punishment happening, and it should, because it's like you lose this year and you get the top pick, which I think it makes sense. I think the top picks, because you're supposed to be players that can change the franchise, should go to bad teams. But if you're picking in the top 3 every year, it's like, all right, maybe you shouldn't be able to get a top 10 pick this year. Like, you should get
maybe not take a pick away, but
like
you
if
should
you're in the lottery 3 years in a row, you automatically can't be in the lottery again or something. I can't see them doing where they drop you down to the G League, even though they get to the point where all the teams own a G League team. So, but I can't see that happening. But we got to do something to these teams that are terrible year in and year out. Fumbling draft picks, fumbling trades, fumbling coaches. Like, we got to do something about it.
Yeah, that's the teams are consistently bad. It's just, it's just so disheartening if you're a fan in that city. Like, there's no hope, and unless, like, even like a team like Charlotte, right? They feel like they got lucky with LaMelo Ball, and it looks like Brandon Miller is going to be, something special, moving forward. But, how much hope do you really have in that Hornets ownership, and the whole setup there, even with the sale of the team and Jordan no longer being involved or whatever, you kind of wonder, like, what am I looking forward to as a Charlotte Hornets fan every year, right? But just to say that, hey, we got LaMelo Ball, he's awesome, and I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation for some of these teams that kind of seem like they're going nowhere. Another thing I kind of want to bring up is a lot of people have kind of been suggesting in recent years, I'd say, that the NBA start looking at what FIBA does in the way of rules in the game, right? With the way that they don't have defensive 3 seconds, and the way that the goaltending thing and all that. And so earlier we talked about, maybe like cross competition, and obviously NBA has different rules than FIBA. So how does that look, obviously? But do you guys think the NBA should consider some of the rules and regulations that Europeans play with and kind of make that as part of the NBA game? They've themselves said that they don't like the FIBA rules, but should they consider it, is my question to you guys.
I don't know if I'm just a creature of habit and I'm just used to it, but I for one, I never liked the goaltending rule. Like, when the ball's on the rim, I don't like that they can knock the ball off. I've never been. I'm not a fan of that. I'm open to the no defensive 3 seconds, because up until the NBA, we basically all play that way. There's no defensive 3 seconds in college or in high school, so I can see that being I can see that not being as drastic of a change. It would, because teams definitely would have to adjust. But I can see that making more sense. I'm just not a big fan of the goaltending thing, honestly. But that has been a talking point for a while. I mean, especially even going back to the '04 team that won the bronze, and it was like they couldn't get the rebound.
Even the '88 team, that was their problem.
Yeah, they never could adjust to that. So that has been an issue. And I think, as far as like doing a tournament, I think whoever turf you're on, that's the rules you play. But yeah, I don't mind the defensive 3 seconds, but I'm not a fan of the goaltending.
I don't mind no defensive 3 second, as long as you put some parameters in it. Because even still, defensive 3 seconds is you have to be in arms with the person.
Yeah.
So it's really not that serious. Make that person get out the lane, like make that person move, and that's how you figure that out. But the goaltending one, I think the biggest problem between America and international basketball, not just Europe. This is no disrespect to any of the talent over there, because they are amazing players. They bring amazing players over here all the time. I think the athleticism is so different over here. If you tell players in high school they can take the ball off the rim for a rebound, that'd be the worst thing. It wouldn't be the worst thing ever, but it would get ugly until they realize how it's supposed to be done, because you would see dudes ball on the back of the rim getting dunked on with the ball just sitting right there. And I just think that changes the game drastically, to the point that it will go back to almost a big man's game, honestly, which I know a lot of people do want for nostalgic reasons. I don't want that. I don't. But The goaltending one is a tricky one because I just think I know it sounds like a cop out, but American players are just so athletic to the point that Zion would have snatched some rims off, knowing he could get the ball off the rebound, like off the
Right.
rim like that. Like,
Right, because I'm and it's funny you said that because the way I'm thinking about it is just how it would affect the game defensively. But yeah, offensively, if the ball just touches the rim, Zion's just gonna dunk everything. So it wouldn't even be fair.
and then with no defense in 3 seconds, I don't think people realize how, as cool as that sounds, like, oh yeah, you add more defense. That's also a real clunky mechanic because it's like I get to stand in the lane and I also get to grab the ball off the rim. Shout and like I said, it's no disrespect to none of the talent or skill set that come from over there, but I don't necessarily, in my opinion, and how I was raised in basketball, I don't think that's genuinely fundamentally good basketball because you're not teaching the big man how to actually move, which is why you do see a lot of slow-footed European big men, not even just European, but it's internationally born big men. You know, you have your exceptions, your Giannis's, Victor with me on players like that, but a lot of those big men, they don't have to move over there because of defense 3 seconds, and you're not going to necessarily see the pick and roll because we're trying to get to that advantage. You're trying to see, you're going to swing the ball. Like I say, once again, no disrespect because I know how some people are going to take it, but it's just two totally different things, and I don't think we have the players who that fit over there. They just don't fit us over here.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a big talking point. You know what's so funny, guys? Everybody always says, "Oh, yeah, we need to do this because we need more defense, more defense, more defense." I feel like maybe this is like controversial, but I feel like people that say that all the time, they're really lying because
They are.
do you like do you like do you like defense or do you like when your team plays good defense? Right? Like
That's right.
you want to watch a 70-65 game again? I'm a Knicks fan, man. We watched that in the 90s, right? We saw that in the early 2000s. Yeah, granted, yeah, you don't want to see 150, 145 every night, probably, but you want a good amount of offense more than likely, right? And that's what people watch for. As much as in me growing up, as much as people loved and idolized Mutombo, he was more of a fringe type player. You wanted guys who actually could do things offensively as well. So I just feel it's something I've always felt where it's just yeah, you is it good defense or is it bad offense? Like, what are you really talking about here? And parking somebody in the lane indefinitely, that's just going to clog up the spacing and the things that we love about the game so much, which is the great things that guys do at the rim, that goes away. You're not really going to have that. Last thing I kind of wanted to bring up on this subject is the length of the regular season. If you look at soccer, the way that they lay it out in every league generally is you play each team twice, once at home, once away, and it ends up in a shorter season, right? And you only play like once a week. NBA players complain about back-to-backs. As a fan, you kind of have schedule losses with certain back-to-backs. Like if you're an East Coast team, you're flying out to Denver, and then the next night you got to go over to Portland. A lot of times, even no matter how good or bad Portland is, you almost assume that's going to be a scheduling loss, right? And so you guys think that there should be a reconfiguration of the schedule to kind of minimize it to where it's maybe you're only playing a couple games a week and eliminating back-to-backs so you have enough recovery time, similar to kind of what they do in soccer.
I like how you didn't ask should they shorten the season. I want to start out there, but you go.
Yeah,
you go first.
Because shortening the season is not going to happen unless people want to get money back. It always comes back to money. I'm sorry.
Of course, yeah.
But I do think, like in a perfect world, if they could maybe reschedule some things, what they've tried to do because they cut out what was it, 4 games in 5 nights or 6 nights, whatever. They tried to cut those out, but I think what always just gets tricky with these things is I don't think what people realize about the NBA is these teams don't really own the arena. They pay rent like we pay rent. So
right.
you kind of schedule out your year based off of when you can get. Like, for example, I lived in Texas. I lived in Houston for a while. But in the month of February, you notice that the Spurs and the Rockets play a lot of road games. In February and March, they play a lot of road games because of the rodeo. and the rodeo have their stadiums booked. So that's when they go on the road a lot. I think to kind of stretch the season out, they might have to make the season not make the season longer, but maybe the dates a little bit longer. But then you play less games during the week and take away a couple of back to backs and stuff like that. But I do think there are a few more tweaks that they can make. But I honestly think they're doing it kind of. They've made improvements to me. Like I don't know if y'all noticed over the last couple of years, there are a lot more like home and homes. Like let's say we played a match, let's go ahead and play them. The Hawks play the matches tonight in Atlanta, then you play them in Orlando 2 days later.
Play Miami after that.
Exactly. So you kind of go ahead and get those games out of the way. I think we will see more things like that happen, and if they can adjust the games during the week, I think that may happen too. I also think we're getting out of COVID where they kind of squeeze all those games in real quick. So stuff is honestly kind of we're like a year, maybe 2 years of it kind of being back to normal.
Something like that.
So I think as it continues to get back to normal, I can't see them stretching out those weeks of the season a little bit more. And I think that could be helpful for players because, like you said, those scheduled losses are real to be an East Coast team. And like you said, you got to fly to Denver. We're playing Denver tonight, and you got to go to Portland. Portland could be trash, but yeah, you're probably going to lose that game. Or you look terrible against Denver, you show up against Portland. One of those games are going to be an L. So I don't really know how you fix that, but I do think finding pockets to stretch the season a little more so you can get a little bit more time in between, which they even did with even like giving them a week break at the All-Star break, if you think about that now. So they've tried to do things because them 82 games ain't going away. But I just don't know how much more they could do.
Nah, yeah, surely. Yeah, the same here. I don't know what exactly. Like I said, All-Star break. They try to give them a week.
Right. Yeah.
Of course, if you play Christmas, you're probably the only team that's gonna play for like a 2-3 day stretch.
Yep.
If you play either New Year's or New Year's,
yeah,
you're probably gonna be the only team to play for a 2-3 day stretch. I think they try to do some things, but I just think it's so hard with 30 teams, 82 games. Like baseball, I think is the only one that has it perfect, and I don't think we want to see basketball go to 162 games.
Right.
So, as much as we love it, I don't think we want to see that. Honestly, I don't think players want to do that. Like, the only thing I could say, maybe you do try to figure out a way to fit more breaks in those pockets. Like you say, just go back to the Houston San Antonio example. You know, rodeo's coming up. You know, they're gonna be on the road, so maybe you don't schedule. Have them 4 game, 3-4 game, 3 and 4 or something like that. So maybe you have them 2 and 4, like and try to do that with every team because just do it for like say Houston and San Antonio is just the example because they have a real reason why they do be on the road for damn near a month and a half or whatnot. But I do think there's ways around it. I do think there's ways to fix the schedule without shortening it. Just trying to figure out a way to get more breaks in there for teams, especially if they're gonna be on the West Coast. Leave them on the West Coast for a week.
I was gonna say that. Like you're West Coast team, you got to move, just leave them on there. But I just think a lot of things that come down to it too is just that ugly fact that most of us don't know or don't care about, and it's the logistics. They don't care about the business side. The logistics of they're on TV for set times because that's what's worked out in the contract, and you need to end it by this time because then these guys have their contract worked out. Yeah. So I think it's little stuff like that like these people don't care about it. We just want our games to play, you know what I mean? But it matters in the grand scheme of things. So, sure.
And you guys kind of brought up the bringing a bigger gap. I mean, that really allows for with this new 65 game rule for awards. It allows more recovery time, right? And those back to backs are kind of what kills you with that kind of stuff. And I think you do that, you might see less players complaining about having to miss time. Or maybe somebody like Tyrese Halliburton, who probably rushed back just so he could hit that 65 game threshold. And it's kind of, he had a period there where he just kind of cratered, right? And, so it's a lot of things that could be changed to make it a little bit better. Before I let you guys go here, obviously playoffs are coming up, only about 10 or so regular season games left. What are you guys looking forward to in the playoffs? Do you guys have any predictions? Any teams we should be on the lookout for? Anything like that?
No predictions, but I do think this year we will. playoffs is always the time for those, it's always been the cliche, those battle tested, those veteran teams. You haven't been here for, you're not going to know what to expect. I think this year's going to be different for those young teams, whereas we seen Orlando, who they didn't win the in-season tournament, but they really competed in it, which kept them afloat, start off the season 24-23. I think people forget it was before that 24-23. It was a stretch where they was really good because of the in-season tournament. They played Boston really well. So now you have them ready to end, they're climbing the standings by the end of the year because they're battle tested. You see a team like Minnesota who's been to the playoffs back-to-back seasons, played the eventual champions last year in the first round, played another young team in Memphis the year before. And you see Anthony Edwards, and he's going at the playoffs. You see Shea. I think people forget Shea went to the playoffs before Chris Paul and OKC. So I don't think these teams are as young as you really think. And I think because of how talented these teams are, being so young, I think that not knowing and not caring factor is really going to carry Minnesota and like maybe Orlando a little further than people think they're going to go.
Yeah, I'm interested to see mainly the West, and just like it could be some potential interesting matchups in the first round, and like you could potentially see KD playing OKC in a series. So it's like you got to go there for a series, or I think it's a slot where it could be Denver and Dallas. Um, the West is just like a juggernaut. Like teams at the bottom are teams coming to the year, at least in particular, Phoenix, Lakers, Dallas. They're the 6, 7, 8 seed. Well, I know they're like 9, but they're fighting for 6, 7, 8, depending on how the play in go in. These are teams I thought they might make it to the finals this year. So, but they're also veteran teams who are teams you can't sleep on in the playoffs. So it's like, all right, I know what we see during the regular season, but the Lakers turned up last year and they ended up in the conference finals. So I'm just interested to see how the West plays out because we've had a different champion, 5 straight years, 6 straight years?
Yeah.
And this is the first year that feels like maybe we could potentially get a back-to-back with Denver, like the first time since those Warriors teams, obviously. But I really don't know who's coming out the West. I have a scenario in my head for 6 teams that could come out from the West. Like legit. I can see Minnesota going, I can see Denver. I see a world where the Lakers could make it with the experience in the team that they have, Dallas with Kyrie, OKC. So like the West is like really, really, really gonna be competitive, which it always is, right? But like it's really stacked. And as far as the East, I want to see Boston not fuck it up to keep it simple. They're going to be the only team that's probably going to win 60 this year. Boston should walk through the East, in my opinion, but I don't think they are. And that's where the East is going to get really competitive because I don't think Boston wants to see the Knicks in the second round or how physical they'll be against them.
I've been saying the Knicks can beat them.
You always got to wonder what Miami's going to do because Miami's a wonky team and what happens with them. But like Boston, the Knicks, Miami, Orlando, the potential of what happens if Joel Embiid comes back, which I don't think he should. But the East has some, there's some things to watch in the East too. But I'm really more looking at is Boston going to slip up. But I'm really interested in how competitive the Western playoffs should be this year. Like I see a lot of game sevens in the West, or tough 6 game series.
I'm looking at the playoffs, guys, and I'm seeing this could be a real changing of the guard year. You're talking about OKC, Minnesota, even New Orleans, has kind of really come on of late, and I tell you what, man, New Orleans could throw that all length lineup at you where the shortest guy on the floor be 6'6", and, they'll be just like, and then you'll have Herb Jones putting you in hell, and it's just like, it's just something that if you watch a game, you kind of are intrigued to see. They got like these, like you look at the way that Houston is kind of nipping at Golden State's heels right now.
I want Houston to make it.
I mean, Jalen Green feels like he's taking a step, and if they get Şengün back here, and it just feels like a lot of these upstart teams are starting to make some noise, and as that continues to happen out east, it's really like you guys said, it should be Boston's to lose, right?
Yeah,
but at the same time, there's a lot of questions around, can Tatum kind of close the deal, which is a little unfair. They've been so successful for the past 5 years, but he hasn't won it yet, and that's kind of the big question. Obviously, as a Knicks fan, I'd love to see them do something, but the amount of injuries is just kind of insane. And I kind of, I know they're not going to do much in the playoffs if they even get out of the play-in, but Chicago now, with them focusing more of their young players, with Levine being out and everything, I just kind of wonder what their future is going to look like. Not this year, but maybe the next couple of years with DeSumo and Kobe White. And, obviously they're probably going to have DeRozan walk. But they got some players there. And maybe there's finally some life in Chicago, which we haven't been able to say since Derrick Rose was injured, right? So yeah, it should be a fun playoff, as it always is. But Fresh Hoopers joining me on this week's edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. Let everybody know where they can follow you guys at.
For sure. Appreciate you for having us, Omar, man. It was a good conversation. But you can find us anywhere podcasts are available. I always tell people, do your Googles, just search the Hoopers Pod, Apple, Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at Hoopers Pod. Follow everything Off the Ball Network. That's it for sure.
I just want to say real quick, outside of, of course, the core group, I feel like Omar is like one of the real. Omar is so open-minded, like anything, not because anything could be a story, but even just how he thinks. Like Omar is really open-minded dude. I know he did our show once, so of course we had to come back and do Omar's show. So hopefully we'll be on here again sooner than later. But shout out to you, Omar.
I'm sure.
Appreciate that, guys. That's always an open invitation. Whenever you guys want to jump on, more than willing to do that. Definitely check out the Hoopers Pod on Twitter and on wherever you get your podcasts. Check out this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on Substack at deepcover.substack.com. Thanks you again, guys. We'll talk soon, and we'll see you all next week.
Peace out.